Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again live from Film Fanatic headquarters for another daily video here on this channel where I try to focus on all things movies. Movies that mean a lot to me, movies that always inspire me. Talked about it before, but I really appreciate there's been more and more folks subscribing to the channel, which has been really awesome. And in particularly more and more people commenting on the videos, and I love having a correspondence with other film fanatics, people that are into the idea of diving deep into the recesses of all things horror. It's my favorite genre, sci-fi horror, especially when those two genres are blended together in a like seamless package. That's my jam. And in particular, the on the low budget side of things, in particular the exploitation world. A lot of the films I cover, or I should say most of the movies that I cover on this channel, are pretty focused on in that world or on that world. That's my favorite world to explore. And again, pretty I like to think I have a pretty wide range of tastes in movies. I love foreign films, documentaries. I've done some specialty shows. I love big budget films. I've done shows on comic book movies and all kinds of things. But my deep love and the thing that I always kind of come back to, the thing that's really kind of my jam is the world of exploitation. So it's been a lot of fun. I've been covering a lot of video. I've been doing a lot of videos lately that are new discoveries of mine, first time watches, and I've bought them, kind of on a whim, based on feeling or based on a feeling that I have as a consumer that it's been with these particular companies like Severin and Mondo Macabro, Blue Underground, so many great companies, and especially Mondo Macabro, which is my favorite. I've had a really good track record with lucking out and buying some really killer movies. So that's been really good. And what they do, especially with that label, Mondo Macabro, is they take a massive deep dive in the world of exploitation. So it's such a world of discovery and a whole lot of fun for me to dive into the deep end of the pool. And it's cool that there are other people out there that kind of dig these weird movies. So it's super cool. So please keep commenting on videos. I've recently a few movies that I did some shows on. A few people that have been checking out the channel have left some really cool comments, and they've also made some cool suggestions for other films and other directors that are kind of related to those particular films, that movies I haven't seen. So that's really cool. That's the thing I love about it the most, about the whole kind of interactive element of doing this kind of a thing. So really, really cool. So today's show is on a movie that I really, really love, and it's a movie I saw many, many years ago, and it was my first introduction to Ty West. Ty West has actually been, well, currently right now he's kind of emerged as, I think right now he is probably at the best point in his career. I feel like he's really arrived as a director. He really has a certain style. He's a really great storyteller. I think he's one of the best working directors in the horror world. And he has a really diverse career. One thing I've noticed too is I think there's a lot of folks out there that realize that maybe don't realize that Ty West has actually been around as a director and filmmaker and also as a writer for quite a few years. And I've been following his career for a long time. But currently, the last year, he has had, like, again, I said, I think he's in the best place he's ever been. He's making the most exciting horror movies around, I think, overall. And in particular, the trilogy that he's in the middle of doing, and that he's the two movies that he released basically all in the same year, which is kind of unprecedented, was X and then also Pearl. Incredible movies. X is such a great film. It came out in 2021, I believe, now at this point, or 2022. And also Pearl came out last year. And it's been a pretty innovative project because basically all three films were done at the same time. And X was a movie I didn't know anything about. I went into it totally cold. I had heard there's one YouTube guy that I follow who is really great, and he mostly focuses on new new films that are coming out, especially new horror films. And that is Chris Stuckman. He's one of the biggest, YouTube guys on the planet. But he's a favorite of mine. He's made some really great videos on a lot of new releases, a lot of new horror films, and I've gotten turned on to a lot of cool films as far as new releases. I most of the time my favorite decades are 70s and 80s, which I've talked about before. And lately I've been going back even further. I've been discovering movies, a whole plethora of movies in the 60s and even late 50s. So really the 60s, 70s and 80s, particularly the 70s and 80s that's my favorite period of horror, science fiction, and all things in the exploitation world. But at the same time, where kind of that's where my brain is most of the time and where my head is at. I also like to keep my finger on the pulse of where horror is now. It's a it's my for me the my most it's a beloved genre of mine. It's my favorite genre. So I love to see and I try to always stay in tune to like where it's going, where it's been, and how it started. And I think Ty West is one of those directors that kind of combines all those things together. So when I saw X, I saw a review on Chris Stuckman's show, and I had not heard about anything about the movie. I didn't even see the trailer. He had given it a really great review. Other films by Chris Stuckman that I've seen over the years, for as far as new, more modern contemporary films, I've always felt that he's nailed it, and I've always like listened to some of his reviews and then would go see those films and was blown away. The Invisible Man, the remake of that, was one of the biggest ones. That movie was just incredible. Movies like The Black Phone, which came out last year also with Ethan Hawke, just a fabulous movie. The Hellraiser series, the new Hellraiser that came out last year. There's a whole bunch of great films, and I've found that my opinions really line up to his views on a lot of these videos, and I've gotten turned on to a lot of movies. And one thing that I try to do now the last few years is I try to stay away from trailers. I try to go into movies, especially new films. I try to go into them as cold as possible. Like if I hear some good things, and I feel like they're coming from sources that are pretty reliable, guys like Chris Stuckman, where I think he generally really knows what he's talking about, and he's giving it a good or a really uh, ra- a real positive review. Usually I'll just go by that, and then I find that my opinions usually totally align with his. So X was one of those movies. And I remember checking out his channel one day, and he had or did a video on this new film X. I knew the only thing I knew about it was that it was a horror movie, and that it was kind of he was saying how it was like a modern slasher film. Slasher films are my favorite, I guess, subgenre or genre in the exploitation world. If you give me a good slasher any time of the day or any day of the week, I'm a happy camper. I love the classic old school low budget slasher film. That's my favorite kind of thing. So I was interested when I heard that, when I saw that in his review. But then when I saw it was a movie by Ty West, who I actually think is I've always thought like he's a director to really watch and to see where he's going in his career, and also someone who has a pretty diverse track record, and he's primarily a horror director, but he's someone to watch. So I was really excited by the prospect of this. And then so I saw a quick little review of the film. It was a really, really great review. I only watched a little bit of it, didn't see any trailers. Went into it, got a hold of a couple of friends, and we went to go see it in the theater. And we were all just blown away by the movie. It was awesome. And it was such a unique film because it was a contemporary like slasher film that was incredibly suspenseful, but it reminded me of a film that like came out in like the 70s. It was like a contemporary, retroactive slasher exploitation movie. And I thought it was a really great blending of that classic era of filmmaking put in this contemporary situation. And it's an awesome movie. I was just totally blown away by it. And it was just such an awesome movie. It was really something new and fresh, but yet it brought me back to, pretty much my favorite decade of the whole slasher exploitation. The movies that were coming out during that period of where they're relying on practical effects. There was no CGI. Everything is in camera. The budgets were always typically low. They were really gritty. They were very kind of dirty. They were sleazy, but they had an element. Always seemed to always have this really cool element of suspense. And I was like, this is that, but in a modern context. And it was taking that style but giving you something new and fresh. Just an incredible movie. I was totally blown away by it, and especially going into that movie totally cold. And at the end of that movie, they had a trailer for the prequel, which was breathtaking. We stayed to the end of the movie, and I was just blown away by how amazing this looked and how different it looked from X. Mia Goth is the star of Pearl and also of X. I had never heard of Mia Goth before, and right away I was just blown away by her ability as an actress. Just such a powerful presence. Just an incredible actress. One of the best working actresses I've ever seen. One of the best working actresses now. And as an actor, has so much depth. So I was just hooked. I immediately became a Mia Goth fan. She's like pretty much my favorite actress right now that's working. And I was really excited by the prospect of what was going on. And then it was shortly after this, seeing X and seeing the trailer for Pearl, which was the prequel. It was announced that this is going to be a trilogy, and there's going to be Pearl was coming out, and it was going to act as a prequel, but then there was going to be a third film also that was going to be centered on Mia Goth's character in those films, that was going to be taking place in the 80s, basically after the timeline of X. And I was just like, wow, amazing. And she plays multiple roles in both movies. She plays like two or three different characters, and you literally cannot recognize her. It's amazing. And she also contributed, other than just being an incredible actress, she also helped write and also put in her own money, helped produce the film, was really, you know, really invested in these projects. Really cool, like just really really great, and it was a lot of passion put in to the movie by her. I feel, and the filmmakers, and especially Ty West. And those two movies, X and Pearl, are just, I think, just amazing movies. I think X was definitely probably overall the best. There was a lot of good films that came out last year. I think X was definitely the best horror movie I definitely that I've seen in the last year. And there's been some really great ones as far as new ones, but I think it's definitely the best one. Pearl, I think, is just about as good. It's a very different kind of a film, but again, pretty equal. I mean, just really strong. I love too that the tone the tone of the film is quite a bit different, and it wasn't a case of them trying to replicate what they started. Artistically, the whole, and also the aesthetics around the film, but the narrative of the story is quite a bit different, but yet it's very much a horror film, and it's kind of a character study. Awesome movie, awesome movie. And I'm looking forward to buying both of those on Blu-ray. Don't own any of those. And then I'm really, really excited about Maxine, which is going to be the sequel to X that's coming out, I think, this year. And that's going to be centered on Mia Goth's character, who she eventually acts to a degree as like the hero of the story in X, and it's going to follow her, you know, into the 80s, and it's going to be a set piece or set in the world of the 80s, which I think is going to be incredibly exciting to see, which is another, decade of filmmaking that I just love to death. So the first movie I ever saw of Ty West was this movie right here, House of the Devil. This was a movie. This was my introduction to Ty West as a director. The the company that put out this movie is a movie company called Glass Eye Pix, which is a real small independent horror company that is owned by Larry Fenderson. And Larry Fenderson, in his own right, is a really great filmmaker. Also, he's another really independent-based horror director. He did this one movie years and years ago called Habit, which is, I think, one of the greatest horror vampire movies that's ever come out. One of the most underrated films. He's made quite a few films, and he moved his career into building up Glass Eye Pix, of where he started to start a company. He started a company that specialized in trying to cultivate new and young and new and fresh horror directors that were kind of coming into their own at the time and releasing their films. And the biggest guy, he's worked with quite a few independent directors over the years and has released a whole bunch of films through Glass Eye Pix. But the biggest, and probably the guy that I always felt was the one to really watch, was Ty West. So I've been following his career for quite a few years. I've seen most of his movies. And House of the Devil, this came out in 2009, and this is a really cool movie. And again, this movie is kind of similar to a degree, like X, being that this movie has very much like that classic 70s exploitation grindhouse vibe to it. The music, the way it's shot, even like the opening credits, and it does take place. The timeline of this film does take place in the 80s, early 80s. So it very much has that vibe. But the fashion, the music. It totally has that classic slasher exploitation vibe. But again, like X, it has that retro feel, but it's not. I feel like it never feels like it's trying too hard to be that kind of film. It just feels natural, but yet what the movie also does is it provides something really new and fresh for the most part and pretty exciting. And it really relies on the character development, but it also really relies on the tension of the story. And I really, you know, I think out of his other films that Ty West has done in his career, this is definitely probably like my second best, second favorite, like behind the X trilogy. That's that we're in the middle of. This is a really very cool movie. It has a vibe where it reminded me of definitely has that classic 80s 70s kind of horror low budget exploitation thing and very much a slasher kind of thing, but it reminded me a lot of one of the greatest horror movies ever made, and it was directed by Roman Polanski, Rosemary's Baby. It very much has that kind of vibe. So it's a little bit of a different tone, but it's still steeped in that classic, in steeped in those, or very much influenced by those classic decades that I mentioned. But very cool, great atmosphere, some really great kills, some really cool, unpredictable shifts in the where the story goes. Really cool music. And the other thing that's really awesome about Ty West is for pretty much all of his films, he not only does he direct his own films, but he also writes a lot of his own films. So most of the work, as far as I know, I think for all of his films, for that matter, he writes all of these stories. All of these stories and the screenplays, they're all from his brain. They're all like original works, and it's that to me is really impressive. That for a director to have that much of a vision and to be that creative and to put out something that is uniquely his own. Very cool. I definitely recommend this movie. I don't own it on Blu-ray, but I got this. I saw this movie. Actually, I think I bought this. I can't remember. Yeah, I got this. I got this film. Like this came out in 2009, so it's been out for quite a few years. It's pretty old by today's standards, 2009. But I bought this at a movie gallery. It still has the movie gallery label on it. Movie gallery was a big, franchise, during the time of like, you know, there was the movie gallery franchise, and then obviously Blockbuster. I think Blockbuster went out of business first, and then movie gallery went after that. Basically, movie gallery was one of the biggest, corporate movie rental places for DVDs, and then they went out of business. And there was a big movie gallery. There was a couple here in Maine, and I remember when they had announced that they closed, I went to a couple of them and just like scooped up as many movies as I could get, and this was one of them. And I think I had rented this movie when it first came out on DVD, and then I bought it, and I really like this movie a lot. It's a very cool, and it was a really great introduction to Ty West's career, to really put him on the like where it gave me the sense of like, okay, this guy is a new like young director who is a really great horror director, but I think he's like somebody to watch, and he's like each movie is getting better and better, and he's like building this momentum. And again, so Pearl came out in 2022. X also came out last year, 2022. Again, unprecedented that a director has, basically shot and created a whole trilogy within a year, basically a year span, and to see that how high quality these films are, pretty unprecedented, pretty special. So House of the Devil that came out in 2009, which is this great movie here. The Innkeepers, which came out in 2011, which is actually a pretty interesting, cool movie. That's like a more of a. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember that movie being more of like a ghost story, more steeped in like kind of the ghost story genre. The Sacrament, which came out in 2013, which is a pretty cool movie. He also did a western in the Valley of Violence with Ethan Hawke in 2016, which is actually a really cool movie. And I think John Travolta is actually in it. And it's a straight up western, but it's super gory and it's pretty violent, and it does have elements of horror, but it's definitely like a traditional western, but very cool movie. I really like that movie. He also directed Cabin Fever 2, which is this wild, which I've never actually seen. I really love Eli Roth is a good director. I feel like his career is a little bit hit or miss, though. I think he's done some really great movies. I think his career isn't probably he's probably not as consistent as someone like Ty West. Cabin Fever being great, that's like I think his best movie. Hostel, he did those films, and those are pretty good. Hostel 2, I think, was really, really good. Ty West also did a short in these series of movies that came out called VHS. And VHS was a cool kind of compilation where it was a collection of all of these shorts, and Ty West was one of the directors. And each of the movies that were in the collection, I think were like 20 minutes, half hour, and Ty West did one of the shorts in that collection, and it's really, really good. It's one of the best ones. Not surprised by that. And Ty West has also had some moments of where he's been an actor, as well as Larry Fenderson, who I mentioned before, who was the guy who was really he's really put he was the guy who really kind of cultivated Ty West's career and has released most of his movies. Larry Fenderson also he's also jumped really into the whole acting world, and he's actually a really great actor. Ty West has also done that, and he was in this other film that came out in 2011 called You're Next, which is a really, actually, I really love this movie, You're Next. It came out in 2011, and he kind of plays himself almost, and he plays a filmmaker he makes these documentaries, but a really cool, kind of old school, new school slasher movie, but very cool movie, super gory. Yeah, great movie. I have that on Blu-ray, which I'll probably eventually do a show on. Ty West also directed The Roost in 2005, which I have not seen. He also did The ABCs of Death in 2012. So he's been around for quite a few years. It's pretty cool. The Roost was his first film, and I don't think I've seen that actually. And again, the first movie I came across of his great career is this guy right here, House of the Devil. Very cool movie. I definitely recommend this movie, especially if you're looking to discover a new, more modern horror director. But just in general, if you're in the mood for like more contemporary horror films, like this is a good introduction. I think X is definitely, without a doubt, his best movie, and also Pearl. Like those movies, kind of feel they're almost like modern horror masterpieces. Like they're really, really good. He really knocked those movies out of the park. I think, just tremendous. They're kind of like next level horror as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, just tremendous. I can't really recommend those films. Like I can't recommend them enough. They're just terrific. And again, 2009 was when House of the Devil came out. Really great cast. Jocelyn Donahue, Greta Gerwig, Greta Gerwig is actually a pretty famous director right now. She was up for a couple of, I can't remember the names of the films that she's done, but the last 2 or 3 years she's done a couple of movies, and one of them I believe was nominated for an Academy Award. Greta Gerwig, yeah, and she's a full on, you know, full on director right now. Tom Noonan is in this film. Tom Noonan is such an awesome character actor. Probably most well known for the original version directed by Michael Mann, The Manhunter, which was the original adaptation of The Red Dragon, the first book in the whole Silence of the Lambs movies. Tom Noonan was the star. He plays Francis Dolarhyde, the Red Dragon in that film. Really awesome movie. Really great character actor. And he is also in House of the Devil. He plays such an awesome character. But fabulous movie, super creepy. So if you're in a mood for some like old school horror that has very much a feel of watching something from the 70s, 80s, particularly like in the horror exploitation world, but is done in a very modern and contemporary, um, or is shown through a very modern and contemporary lens. House of the Devil is that movie. Super suspenseful, great atmosphere, generally creepy, and some really great kills. So Ty West, can't say enough about him. I think he is at the best point at the he's at his strongest period, I think, in his career. So very excited to see what he does next because he's been knocking them out of the park. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again, everyone. I really appreciate all the support over the last few months. And if you like this channel, please like and subscribe. And we will see you next time. Peace.